and I want to welcome everybody here to our second public information session for the Academy Project. I'm Peggy Lyons, your first selectwoman, and tonight I'm joined here tonight with my fellow selectmen, Al Goldberg, Jen Gordon, Scott Murphy, and Bruce Wilson. We as a board have been working very closely together to ensure that any final decisions on the Academy Project are made not by us, but by the public that approved it in the first place back in 2022. We all come before you with very mixed emotions. Disappointed that we can't accomplish this, what I think is a transformational project for our downtown within the original budget, but also very proud of how we've come with this since the vote in 2022. There's been a lot of hard work done by a lot of volunteers in town on this project. And we're excited to show a way forward to make it happen using outside grants we've already been awarded with, which will allow us to deliver a building that meets the public expectations. So I have up on the screen these three pictures here to show that Academy is not just an empty eyesore in our downtown. It has played a role in our history for over 140 years. Ultimately, the decision to proceed with the future of Academy rests in the hands of all of you, the people of Madison, where it all originally began. So this has truly been a community-driven project from day one. So next slide. And I just want to highlight how much of the community has volunteered their time and attention to this over the last 20 years. We have our existing building committee, and the chair, Joe Valentine, will be speaking in a few minutes about the work that they've been doing over the last 2 years. But then look at on the other side of the slide, all the different committees and commissions, including the Academy Advisory Committee, who will be speaking tonight, that looked at this building and what to do with it since it was closed by the Board of Education in 2004. And if you flip through those proposals, and they're pretty much all online and available to see, a lot has been thought through, a lot has been investigated, a lot has been researched and analyzed, consultants have been hired, the building has been examined. So this is not a new thing. This has been going on for a long time in town. And the only concept that made it to this point was the community center concept that really was born out of the Academy Guidance Committee that started in 2018. And then that, through a public poll, came up with the community center idea, which then turned into a design committee that designed the Academy Community Center. Pretty similar to what we're actually seeing here today that the public is going to be voting on. So this has really been a long process with a lot of people supporting it, and I think sometimes we forget that history and we get mired down into the quagmire that we're in today in terms of budgets. But the reality is this is something that the community has pushed the town to do and resulted in the community support through public vote. So the next slide just highlights why are we here today having another referendum. Back in 2022, the town approved $15.9 million in bonding to pay for the project that would convert it into a community center and some municipal space. It was the only concept, as I mentioned before, that gained consensus throughout the town over the last 20 years. And I do want to highlight that include looking at housing development. How many people in this room were sitting in those presentations back in 2018, I think, and looking at the options of basically building over the green space downtown in the ball fields. And how many, I was on LoCap back when I was on the Board of Finance back in 2010, and there was discussions about turning it into a commercial venue, turning it into retail shops. There was all kinds of conversations about that. So a lot of the ideas that are popping out now, they've all been discussed, but there was nothing really that the town could come together in for use to save the building. The one unique thing, though, is everybody wanted to preserve the building at the time. Unfortunately, we've all seen the extraordinary inflation since 2022, and unfortunately that hit this project very hard. We can get into a lot of the reasons why. Some of it had to do with the fact that the building had deteriorated so much over the last 20 years because the town, unfortunately, made the decision to turn off all utilities in the building in 2011. So that just accelerated any problems that you would have with an old building. But in addition to that, we hit some headwinds, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. So we were hoping we were only going to be $2 or $3 million short. We decided let's go out to bid and see where we land. We've been very successful at getting a bunch of grants. We've gotten $7.5 million in grants. And we thought if we're only a couple $1 million short, we can get permission from the public to use that. We'll still have money to pay off some of the bonds that we were anticipating. Unfortunately, the bids came back. I think all of us were gobsmacked when we saw the numbers. That the budget was actually $8 million short. So we had to step back and rethink about this. But we really felt that given where we were and what the future of this project was and where the town was, that should be a decision made by the voters of this town. Do we want to take that grant money and put it towards the budget? Or do we want to basically have to possibly not proceed with the project? Because the other conclusion that the board came to with the community center, with the building committee, was that we basically can't, for $15.9 million, deliver a functioning community center. We wanted to make it work. I think and that's one of the delays that happened. We asked the committee to go back and look at different design options and things, and can we take this off? Can we change the entrance? Can we value engineer it a certain way? But the reality, given where the construction market is today, $15.9 million is not going to cover what's needed for that building to turn it into functioning space. So that's when the board made the decision, let's go out to the people, let's take the money that we're getting from outside sources, which a lot of communities do. We were fortunate that we were taking this to reduce bonding. A lot of towns rely on grants to pay for projects all the time. But we were fortunate that we were going to be able to use these grants to pay off any expected bonding. So that is where we are, and that's what the May 6th referendum is going to be doing. It's going to be asking for permission to spend $24 million on the project, capping it at $24 million for the construction of the project, and then using those grant funds. So no more bonding is being requested. We are capped at the $15.9 million that was approved in 2022. So the next slide, I just want to highlight again, why did this get passed in the first place and why do we need this? And this is all things that you might have seen in the original presentation back in 2022. But I want to highlight a couple things. I think first and foremost, it's the preservation piece. Preserving a landmark in our downtown historic district. That's what generated so much community interest and passion about this building. Community centers you can see in old schools all over the state. And you can see newly built community centers like Guilford has. But this is unique. It's in the heart of our community, and it's also a building that has a very important part in our town history. So if you combine that together with all the things that you can do from an economic development standpoint with a community center that's located in the heart of our town, it just brings a lot to a lot of different people. And it serves all generations. So senior center is kind of focused on the seniors. Well, the community center is really serving all generations as well as our business community. We've envisioned it as an economic driver for not just the town, but across the shoreline. To bring as a destination people to Madison, not just in July when the weather's nice and people want to go to Hammonasset or they want to go down and sit outside at Cafe Allegra. This is to bring people to Madison in February so that we have more flow of businesses. Our restaurants will benefit from that and more community activity in the heart of our town. And we've had people talk about it at the last public information session about how that sense of vibrancy has been lost since that school was closed. When you had a school down there, you had people going back and forth all the time. You had activity, you had livelihood, and we've kind of lost that at that part of our downtown. So that's one of the many reasons that this serves, but that's why this is unique. This isn't just a building to have, limited, card clubs or art classes in. It's a combination of so many different things to so many different groups, and because of the size of the building and the unique characteristics of it, we can serve so many different things by completing it. So the next slide just highlights what I was talking about, that this bookends our town. If you look, we have the library on one end, and we have Main Street and all our shopping district, and then you have the community center and the ball fields. And it really creates a corridor for our community. We're fortunate to have something like this. This is something a lot of towns would dream of, because there's so much activity, it creates a destination for people when they come to Madison, and it serves Madison residents as well. The next slide just talks about, this also aligns with our strategic plan, which the town endorsed at the end of 2023. And we asked the town residents, a lot of people participated in surveys as well as coming to focus groups, what they want from their town and what they want with from their government. And the community center concept addresses a lot of the things that are in the strategic plan. So I encourage you to read that strategic plan again and look at, you know, how this can tick off or hit a lot of those benchmark things that the town has been looking to accomplish. The next slide is just a little bit of the history lesson again. I'm sure some of you here probably know this history, but there are a lot of new people in town, and I won't dwell on this too much, but I do want to talk about the fact that, you know, this property was gifted to us by Daniel Hand, and there were some stipulations about this, that it always had to be known as Hand Academy, and it had to be used for educational purposes. And so when the town actually moved the school, the high school, you had to get a stipulation removed from the deed so they could name Daniel Hand High School, Daniel Hand High School. So education, community education was always a foundation of why this town was given the property. In 1920, the town voted to consolidate one-room schoolhouses in town to create this new school on the Hand Academy site at a cost of $151,000. So what residents had the wisdom to approve that and to say we need this for our community, and they approved the spending on that. In 1935, they added the addition of the 4 classrooms in the gym. Everybody talks about the big thing on the back that's kind of sticking out. And that was actually funded through a grant. So that was a WPA grant. This was during the Depression for $45,000. So even back then, the history of this building, the federal government invested in Madison and saw wisdom to do that. And look at what it did for our community for so long. So the benefit of that investment by our federal government has served the town of Madison for a long time. And so in the spirit of that, I think it's kind of interesting how we're also looking for another federal grant that we got approval for to be investing in this for the next 50 to 100-year use of this building. And so I just think it's important to highlight that. And then this obviously highlights things that are people more familiar with, the establishment of the guidance committee, the Academy Community Center Design Committee, which we'll talk about, and then finally this going to the voters in 2022. And one thing I want to highlight, when the community center was designed back in 2019, the intention was to go to referendum in 2020. I was elected in November of 2019, and I think our board agreed we need to let the people make a decision on this building. Enough of kicking the can down the road. It's been 20 years. Here's a responsible plan for the use of the building. Let people vote on it. And then unfortunately, as happens all the times, another headwind hit, and that was COVID. And so the board opted to take a pause for about a year on the project and just reassess and say, where are we on this? And it was also being bundled with the school project referendum. And so we took a year. And we took a break, and then we revisited over the summer. And in that point in time, I had heard a lot of people concerned about this is massive 40,000 square foot building. It's never going to get used. Why are we doing this? And so we looked at a study that the town had completed on needs for town offices and determined that it would make sense to include some municipal offices in the building. So you'd have people living and breathing in the building all day. So it wouldn't be sitting there empty, which I don't think anybody thinks that's going to be the case, but you're going to have a core tenant in the building, and that was going to be Madison Youth and Family Services, which needs at least double the space that they currently have. And so this was seen as being kind of kill two birds with one stone. It makes sense, and now we don't have to invest a couple $1 million expanding the space for Madison Youth and Family Services. So then we rolled that in prior to the referendum, and then we went out to the vote in February 2022, and it passed. So it passed, and then after that, we set up the building committee. Next slide, Jeannie. We set up the building committee, and we set up what we call the Academy Advisory Committee. One of the things that the board had heard from the public is there was a lot of different interest in this building with a lot of different uses for it. And some of those were competing interests, and some of them were very much aligned. And we wanted to make sure that everybody's voice was heard, and that when we went through the construction process, we could try to incorporate some of those uses, so we were smart about it, right? We didn't want to have, somebody come back and say, well, why didn't you put more outlets in this room? Because this would be a great space for, technology shows or something like that. So we tried to incorporate a lot of that into the design, and that's when the advisory committee was established. And we had a group of volunteers that did a survey, and we'll talk more about what came out of that survey. But we wanted to make sure that they were being heard as the building committee moved through the design process. We were also awarded a $4 million urban action grant by the state. I think that was the largest grant that the town has received, to my knowledge, ever from the state of Connecticut. The state of Connecticut saw the wisdom in the project and thought it was a great investment in the town. And so basically 2023 and 2024, there was a big focus on the design. But they knew starting in 2023, because inflation started really hitting, that there was going to be budget challenges. And so that caused delays in the design process. I think there was a lot of time spent on value engineering. How do we make this work? Can we make it work? They started getting into the building and realizing some of the deterioration was more than they'd expected. And so it did take a while, but they finally got to a point where they came to a design that we felt was probably not going to be able to be accomplished in the $15.9 million, but they thought they might be $2 to $3 million short. We also received a congressional directed spending grant from the federal USDA, and we learned about that in 2024. That was for $3.6 million. Very grateful for that grant. And once again, federal government seeing the value of what a community center can do for the town of Madison. And then finally, here we are, in the end of 2024, the building committee chose to go out to bid. The idea was, if we're going to have to ask the public for money, we can't do it without really knowing how far off we're going to be. And so the decision, normally you get a budget, and you get a budget, and then you go out to bid. This time we said, let's go out to, before you go out to referendum, get your approval for funding, then you go out and go out to bid. And this time we said, we're probably going to have to get public approval for funding, but we're not quite sure where this is going to land. So let's go out to bid and see where we fall, and maybe we'll luck out. Maybe we'll luck out. Well, unfortunately, we didn't. And so here we are with the results that we had, with the $8 million gap that we've been talking about, and needing to kind of fill that with the grants that we've received. So the next slide, I'm going to actually turn it over to Bill Stableford, who has been in this project, was on the Academy Design Committee originally, and then he was chairing the Academy Advisory Committee. I see other members here tonight as well from that committee. They did a lot of hard work, and he'll spend a few minutes just talking about what the town residents wanted to see in this facility.
Great. Thank you, Peggy. Okay. The Academy Advisory Committee first met in September of 2022. Our charge was to provide guidance and recommendations to the building committee on both what the public desired in terms of activities available in the building, and therefore also what types of structural facilities within the building would allow it to accommodate those activities. We were a committee of 9 members. We met weekly, and we submitted our final report in March of 2023. You can find that report online at MadisonTV.org/academy, and that's what it looks like. So how did we go about assessing the needs of the community and what Madison residents wanted to see? First, we designed and created an online survey. I want to thank John Lamoran for his technical advice on that. Then we printed up hundreds of postcards describing the project and providing both a website and a QR code. People could fill out the survey online and could even fill it out on their iPhones. We made concerted efforts to go out into the community and hand these hundreds of postcards out to all kinds of events and activities and school events and whatnot. We obtained 2,049 responses. And those responses reflected very, very closely the age and demographic levels of everybody in the community. So everyone from teenagers to seniors got to say. The general survey results are on this slide to my right. You can see that the types of activities that were most favored were arts and entertainment. This included music, theater, dance, painting and drawing, photography, ceramics, pottery, and crafts. Hundreds and hundreds of people requested lessons in all of these activities. People were eager to learn about how to engage in these types of activities. The second most important request was for community space. If you recall, this survey went out shortly after the COVID pandemic had ended. People were very eager for gathering space, to touch base, just to have a place to hang out, meet with each other. Strong desire for community meeting spaces, private gatherings, celebrations, and business and exhibit space. The next highest level of interest was for sports and recreation, and you name it. Exercise and fitness classes, pickleball, basketball, table tennis, pool table, climbing wall, volleyball. A lot of interest in physical activity. The next level of interest was for activity rooms, youth social space. Kids want a place to hang out after school. A cafe and a lounge where people would come in right at the entrance and just stop in and hang out. Again, just gathering space for people. Parents of young children requested activity rooms for preschool children, meeting rooms for organizations. A big element and focus on multi-generational activities, a place where people of all ages could gather and interface. Arts and crafts was the next level of interest, and these kind of tied in with arts and studio art. The final thing we did was our committee held focus groups with professionals from the area of performing arts, dance, theater, music, studio arts, painting, drawing, professionals from culinary arts, what would work in a community kitchen, and then finally we met with Daniel Hand High School youth. We met with 40 students who were identified as student leaders, and we heard from them what they wanted, and we incorporated that into our recommendations to the building committee. So that's what we did, and those were the results. Thank you, Peggy.
Great, thank you very much, Bill. And thanks again to all the volunteers on that committee. I know it was an extensive outreach, and I think that was the largest response to a survey the town has ever seen. So there's a lot of hard work put into that. The next slide is really to talk about the building committee, which has really been dedicating a tremendous amount of time. And I want to introduce Joe Valentine here to talk a little bit about the work. I know some of the building committee members are here in the audience. But they have been extraordinarily dedicated to this. And I have to say, our board hasn't made it easy for them, because we can't ever tell them what the budget is, because we said, well, you got 15.9, but 15.9 is not going to do it. And so it's been a real struggle. They've been looking at all different ways to make this work, and finally felt, really, our board said, let's just design this to what the community expects and then see where it lands in terms of cost. So with that, I'll turn it over to Joe.
Thank you, Peggy. The building committee was formed somewhat after Bill's committee, and I feel like we stand on the shoulders of giants here. And with Bill, that's literal. We took a lot of the input that he had as a starting point. He gave us for the starting point for the beginning of the building. I have to admit, when I was asked, I was very enthusiastic. My history goes back fairly far with Academy. My kids went there. I was there when it was a vibrant downtown area, when the corridor between, at that time, Island Avenue and Academy was filled with parents and teachers and meetings and activities, and it was a great place to be. We'd like to make it a great place again. The committee, the building committee, consisted of 7 volunteers. We are very lucky in a town like Madison to have talented people, people with architectural experience, people with project experience to serve on the committee. And we very quickly selected both Colliers as our project manager, owner's project manager, and QAM Architects as the architect. These are companies that have been involved over a number of years, and thinking that using this committee would give us a head start and turbocharge the process and get us to a point where we'd be able to go out to bid really quickly. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. We ran into a number of, quite a few design issues that both made it difficult to make difficult choices, and also brought the project more expensive as we went along. We did each estimate that we did for building the committee was higher than the last one, and all of them were higher than the budget that we had of $15.9 million. It was a frustrating period. But as Peggy said, eventually we were given the charge and took that we would stop looking at what could we get for $15.9 million, and we'd start looking at what it would take to build a building at the scope that was envisioned by the town, and given to us by the committee, and the Bills Committee, and also that met the expectations of the 2022 referendum. What was presented at the 2022 referendum, and how could we meet their expectations? We believe that the current scope that we've given for the project, that is the $24 million, actually we came up with $23.9 million estimate. The scope of that 23.9 matches the expectations that we had at the 2022 referendum. Just a couple of details. Can I go to the next slide, please? There it is. There were a number of things we kept from the original design concept. One is we wanted the building to be ADA compliant, and unfortunately, Academy the building is at a half story. So every entrance would have to be a step up or a step down. Step up to get to the main level, step down to get to the lower level. So that we settled on a design for an atrium that was actually at ground level and at grade, and all the floors would be accessed by an elevator. We also decided to keep the atrium in the building. If you haven't been in the building, or if you remember the building, it has an interior atrium that essentially open to the sky up above. It lets light into the building at various places in the corridors and in some of the classrooms, and it's a great feature. And we have tried, and the current design keeps that atrium and keeps that light visibility into the building. We also kept what used to be the library, or now the front of the building that you'd see if you came in from Route 1, as a very flexible space. It has a small stage that's ADA compliant. It would be called a recital stage. It's really not a performance stage. You wouldn't put a Broadway show there, but you could have a speaker, or you could have maybe a small group of musicians perform there. The gym space is, you got to realize the gym space is a high school gym from 1936. There are some improvements to be made. We're padding the walls a bit so people don't run into the walls, updating the floor to take the asbestos tile and the asbestos adhesive that holds it in place. But there's been a lot of question about the stage there. That stage in the gym was never set in any of the original scope, was ever set to be totally refurbished into a performance stage. It is just too big, and for the dollars that we had. And then also, a performance stage would conflict with the primary gym, with the gym, which is the primary use of that building. You couldn't set up a set of seats and then leave them up and have the gym not be available. So that was always a future. We'll put up some curtains around the windows, but we're not going to. It never was meant to be a performance stage in the design. There is a possibility, we had some estimates on it, but it's not part, it was never part of the original design, and it's not part of this design. The incorporation of Madison Youth and Family Services, they're on the first level and on the upper level, second level, and on the first level, which is really below grade. So having the offices there gives the building life, and it doesn't interfere with the main area, which is the concession, the cafe, the youth hangout area, art room, all at the entrance level. As you come up the elevator or walk up the stairs, you enter into a space where the atrium is, and also some of the main activities. And also that would be where the Beach and Rec will be doing checking or monitoring the comings and goings of the people coming in and out. We are looking at a commercial kitchen. The good news about trying to get a kitchen is the kitchen space is at the lower level was a cafeteria one time that fed 200 students every day. So we have plenty of space to design design both a commercial kitchen and possibly a teaching kitchen too. So that is going to be part of the kitchen design. And there are additional rooms. There are rooms that they're just large rooms that could be multifunctional. The thing that when I go through there, when I walk through there, I see the old building that I used to know, but I see the potential in that building. High ceilings, high walls, we don't talk about it much, but even the halls are big. And you could do a farmer's market in the hall and not even interfere with the space. They're extra wide and extra tall. It's a great space, and I'm looking forward to seeing it come back again. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Joe. A lot of work, and all the information is available online of the work of the building committee, including design plans, construction documents, all that stuff. So a lot of good information, a lot of hard work. Moving on to the next slide is just highlighting some of the budget, challenges this project has had. The original estimate was actually dated in 2018, and that was based on the original design committee that Bill Stapleberg was involved with. And when we decided to move forward again with the referendum that had been postponed, we asked the advisor to update it for normal inflation as well as account for youth and family services going in there. And then we also had aspired to put in a geothermal system at the time, not knowing if it would work with the building, but we said let's add some buffer into the budget to do that. And that's when we went out with the $15.9 million. We did talk about grants. We were going to be seeking grants. The presentation for 2022 is also available online. But I will say, I don't think I ever envisioned $7.6 million or $7.5 million of grants. I mean, we were $1 million. The town historically has gotten those type level of grants, nothing at the level that we were able to get from both our state officials and our congressional delegation. So, and then what happened now is we went out to bid in the fall, and the bids came back in December, and unfortunately came back way more than any of the estimated. We had professional estimators put numbers together in October and on the construction budget, and even then when the bids came back from the market, it was way in excess of what those estimators had come up with. So we were all really taken aback. The building committee then took that and basically went back and said, well, here's what we recommend based on these bids, what we would envision the project to look like if we had the funding in place. We then took that in-house, the town staff kind of reviewed it, looked at some of the constraints we have, the grants, and came up with a new proposed budget. And there is a little gap between what our existing grants are and what the total budget number is. I'm a believer in round numbers, keeping it simple, so I said let's just ask for 24 million. I'm also optimistic, an eternal optimist. We're going to be looking to maybe get some more grants and then also donations. We've had some people interested in possibly donating some things to fill that budget gap. But we're also confident that we can deliver the building within the grant funding that we have. And we did a lot of analysis looking at that. There's options based on what the construction package went out versus where we might look at this again for some additional cost savings. So we felt, based on the advice of town staff, that we felt comfortable with the $24 million number. And so that's what we're seeking for approval, to spend $24 million on the construction of the building. And like I said, the bonding would remain to be capped at 15.9. So next slide, just to talk a little bit about the cost, because I think we're all, stunned in some ways by where things have gone, but I hope this illustrates a little bit about what we've been dealing with, showing where the construction market has been. So you can see where the original budget estimate had been done, and then where the referendum estimate had been. And this is, from the government, a line of the cost of basically producer price index for final demand construction. And so when you look at this, you can see, really, February of 2022, if you recall, that's when the Ukraine war started, and we really started to see an acceleration of inflation because of a lot of global uncertainty and commodity prices. COVID impacted because of supply chain issues, and the construction market was crazy. I mean, things were coming in 20, 30, 40% what they had been a year or two earlier. And we've seen this in a lot of projects, and we were facing this a little bit with the school project as well. And fortunately, new construction, a little different story when they went out to bid. We were fortunate there to land in a better place. That's part of the reason we thought, well, let's go out to bid and just see. Maybe we'll look out with Academy too. And unfortunately, we didn't. And then on top of that, you've just got deterioration. There was some assumptions made. People can argue whether those are good assumptions or bad assumptions, but when you have something that had been sitting there as long as it had, I don't think people were quite fully aware. We didn't spend any money to go in and do a lot of demolition work and investigation. We were eager to get this out to referendum because we were building on the 2019, guidance committee recommendation. And I think since the referendum passed, we had a budget to actually start doing some work and looking at things, and having engineers going in and septic analysis and all this stuff that started coming back and saying, well, you're probably going to need to do this, and then pile on top of that just these significant cost escalations. And there are a lot of towns that have had to go out again to approve more funding for projects. So we're not alone. We've got a lot of construction projects going on in town, and a lot of them, some of them, we've been fortunate where we haven't had to do that, but this is one that we did. The next page just talks about the financing costs, and a lot of people ask, what is it going to cost me as a taxpayer? And basically, the bonding amount is the same as what went out in 2022. So if you look at this chart, these estimates in the 2022 column represent how much it's going to cost a household each year per $100,000 of assessed value. So if your house, and this is assessed value, so remember your house is 70% of market value. So, if your assessed value is $300,000, you would take that number, multiply it times 3, and that's the cost of the bonding to you as a homeowner. And interestingly, if you take that same analysis today, our grant list has grown a lot. We've had a huge increase in our grant list. We did the revaluation last year. We've also had some growth. So the cost has been distributed now across a wider denominator, basically, of tax base. And so the cost is marginally less, but roughly equivalent to what we were showing in 2022. So the financing cost is really not gone up that much. And so, yes, we've seen interest rates go up a little bit, but we've been fortunate. Our town has a AAA rating. We've had our bonds have been very successful when we've done our issuances. We've done 2 now, and they've been well received in the marketplace. And so we haven't seen a huge impact in terms of our cost of financing too much. We've had some, but then this has helped us in terms of the growth of our grant list. The grants, the DECD grant, that's through the state. We have a signed agreement with the state, and they're aware, that there's been a delay in the project. We've been in conversations with them. The federal grant, we weren't sure what was going to happen with that, because it takes 6 months to a year just to get the agreement signed once you're given the award. And the grant that we got, it was through the USDA. It was a congressional directed spending grant, so it was an earmark. And our congressional delegation worked very hard, It got put into the 2024 fiscal year budget that didn't even it got passed through a continuing resolution in 2024 late, and so we didn't even find out until March of 2024 that we actually got awarded it. And then it takes 6 months to a year to get the agreements done. So obviously with the change in administration, and we started receiving emails from different agencies where we had federal grants telling us things were paused and hold, they're going to be investigated, they're going to scrutinize them to see if they follow the objectives or whatever of the administration. We still didn't have a signed agreement, and so we thought, and this is another reason we kind of had to step back and pause for a minute. This was back in February. Is this grant good? Well, fortunately, we actually got the signed documents back at the end of February. And just got communications within the last week about when we can start requesting reimbursement on some expenses. So we feel pretty good about the federal grant as well. So we're in good shape on that. And so we're going to proceed with those grants, but we're also looking into a few others. We're meeting with the state again in a couple weeks and pursuing a SHIPA grant. And hopefully might be able to pull in some more funding here too to help us with the budget. Next page is just a schematic of the building use, and this is pretty similar to what it was shown in 2022. I do want to highlight the next page about municipal use. This became a point of conversation. There were somehow this building has become, town hall too, and it is not. It is basically roughly the same square footage that was presented in 2022 for town offices, which is in 2022 was about 14%. Youth and family was less than 10% or 12%, and now it's even shrunk a little bit more. So with the final design and how they worked out things, so youth and family continues to have space on the lower level and then on the second floor. And they've broken up their clinic in one area and then their offices in another. And so, clearly in a building this big, there's room for everybody. And Beach and Rec is just going to have an administrative office in the front. They're going to be managing a lot of the program in the building and overseeing it. So that's kind of been consistent all along. And I know there was some design changes back and forth with youth and family, but where the building committee and landed was pretty much trying to stick with what was discussed at referendum. So you see there was not a lot of changes done to that. Revenue, I know that's always been a conversation. The intention was once we went out to started construction, when we had firm design plans, we were going to be putting together policy for the building. We've been doing a lot of research on it. I have to say it's difficult to figure out utilization of a building like this because it's complicated, it's big, and no one's going to tell you what their interest is until they actually see what they're looking to use. You need a finished product. And so we did some analysis and we said, okay, I feel like I skipped ahead. Cost is on the next page. Okay, these are a little out of order. Anyway, so I'll talk a little bit about the utilization rate, but basically we did some analysis. We looked at rent that the town currently charges, which I think the board needs to revisit because we're a bargain compared to other communities in terms of usage charge. But the other thing that revenue comes from is actually the programming that runs through it. So right now, the town, if we run a program through Beach and Rec, we actually get an administrative fee of about 25% on top of the cost of the program. So that is going to be a possible revenue driver because we see a lot of interest in people wanting to run their programs and use the space. So it's not renting a room out to a group running a program. It's really they're running their program through us and we get a 25% administrative fee on top of that. So there's different ways to look at this, and I think this is where the board has to decide. And then, looking at can you have some more committed time slots available for certain organizations? Say if a group wants every Friday afternoon a certain room because they have certain needs to offer. So those are things the board will have to talk about. It's also being financed through tax-exempt bonds. So we can't charge for-profit rates. We can't compete with other commercial entities. So there are a lot of opportunities. We've been looking at this quite a bit. There's also social events. And I will say I'm confident we're going to be able to generate some revenue in the building. How much is the big question? It's a big building. But what we did do is when we looked at the operating costs of the building, we came up with, if you just take what we charge right now in town for our building, for our rooms, and assume that 30% of the space is going to be used on average over the year, you cover your operating costs.
What are your operating?
So that's the next slide. So I do feel like there's a good baseline there to try to recoup some of the operating costs. Next slide is the operating costs, and we presented in 2022 some costs. They came up with around $300,000. We updated those for utilities, maintenance costs. We looked at staffing again, and basically we decided that the beach and rec person needed probably a little bit more upgrade in the position because we think a lot of the programming is going to be running through beach and rec. So that's why the salary increase is a little bit higher. And then we think that we'll probably want to have a facility monitor there permanently in hours where there's not staff in the building. So we offered that right now at the town campus gym, the senior center at times. It would be flexible time that we would use as part of staffing the beach and rec has for different operational needs throughout town. So we kind of came up with a certain number of hours or whatever that we would need this facility monitor person. Just somebody there to answer questions, point people in direction, open things, get custodial help, things like that. So this is kind of in line with what we showed in 2022, and then we just updated it and kind of rethought it again for 2025. So we're talking about $400,000 a year. So that's where when I talked about the revenue, like I said, we need to figure this out, but there is a reasonable assumption you can make that you can get some of that operating cost back in terms of revenue. Next slide. So if this does not pass, what happens? I think the board is now of full agreement that the 15.9 just doesn't deliver a community center. So there's no value engineering down to something, and believe me, we talked about a lot of different things internally as well, but we can't deliver what the public wanted in 2022. So we spent about $1 million on the project to date. We've already issued $6 million in bonds, and we've been awarded $7.6 million in grants. The bond proceeds that haven't been used, we can use to pay off existing debt and maybe look at some other options for that. We have to talk to bond counsel about that because we have some prospectuses that were issued, investor expectations. We have a lot of things we have to consider before we make a decision on what we would do with that. The grant funds, I think, are lost. The federal government already made it clear. They said, don't come back until you start construction. Don't ask for any reimbursements. We need to make sure that the community center is going to happen. So the grants are lost. We'll be losing $7.6 million for that building if we don't proceed with the community center. We'll probably have to spend some money on just more asset protection just because it's deteriorating every day. And then we're going to have to look at demolition. The cost of demolition is probably going to be $2 to $3 million minimum anyway. So we're going to need money to demolish it as well, if that's the path that we end up having to take. So those options are all going to be on the table. I think we're still going to have programming needs that aren't going to be met. We'll still have to figure out using family. I think the last estimate was $3 million for the...
So it was around $2 million.
$2 million, that was back in...
2018.
Yeah, 2018, $2 million for addition, so double it, probably $4 million now. But so we're going to have to deal with somehow working out youth and families needs. And then I think the board is going to have to make some tough decisions because so many things have been looked at. I know times have changed, the world has changed, maybe some of these things have to come back on the table. But the bottom line, to do anything with that building, it's gonna cost $16 million just to get court, no matter who's in that building. You need HVAC, you need new plumbing, you need a new septic. So all of that work is still gonna cost at least $15.9 million. So no matter what happens with that building. So it's gonna be a big, a big undertaking to figure out the next steps. And I think what hadn't been discussed before was demolition, but I think we're at a point now because of the state of the building, we're really gonna have to seriously look at that. So, so that's really what would happen if it failed on May 6th. So next slide is just where we are now. Obviously these public information sessions. The Board of Selectmen on April 8th, next Tuesday morning, will be doing the formal call to call the question for the referendum. And that will basically formally start the referendum process. The town will mail a postcard, which we did for the last referendum, to all taxpayers, alerting them of the upcoming vote. And then we have a special town meeting that's required through our charter that's more procedural. It basically adjourns to referendum. So there's no ability to kind of stop the referendum. It's just a formality where we adjourn to referendum. So that'll be on April 22nd. And then, May 6th is the vote. And it's going to be on the same ballot as the budget, school budget and town budget votes. And so it'll be a third question. And I think really then if it passes, we will reconvene the building committee, and they'll work with town staff to put together a new bid package. There's some things that could be, just handled a little differently moving forward, get some more resolution on some outstanding issues that are there, put the new bid package together, and then go out to bid with the hope to be awarding contracts in the fall, and then it would take a year for construction. So the earliest it would open is 2026. I hope it will open in fall 2026. We're celebrating our 200th anniversary in 2026 as a town. So I think it would be really fantastic to have this building open by the end of the year, celebrating the history of Madison. And that's kind of where we are. So just the last slide is just to highlight again, the opportunity. And we've talked about this, how it aligns with our community mission and values. It revitalizes something that's right in the heart of our community. And I also want to talk about, it's a value proposition for Madison taxpayers. Things like this drive property values and attract people to the community, just like our schools and our beaches. It's an investment in the town. And when you think about all the great amenities that we have, this is going to be another opportunity to add a great amenity that will help our economic development. So I think it'd be a great positive for us. It also is going to address space needs that the town has, and it just really adds to the flavor of our town and adds a lot of vibrancy downtown. So with that, I'll open up for questions in a minute. I just wanted to real quickly, we do have a video of so you can kind of experience the walkthrough. There's a new one coming out tomorrow that has the second floor too, but we didn't get it back in time to put it up here tonight. So we'll just run this video and then we'll go for questions. asking questions. So I know we might have some online as well, but please stand up, say your name and address, and
Say a few words.
Yeah, but it's a wire, it's not working,
Oh.
it's not remote.
Okay.
Imagine if this worked.
well, you can just ask your question. I mean, it's not that big of a, yeah. Well, you can just ask your question.
So, my name is Jan Aaronworth. I've lived in Madison for over 40 years now. I really appreciate the tremendous amount of work that's gone into this project. It's obvious people have spent a lot of time and a lot of effort. And unfortunately, I think the Board of Selectmen has gotten extremely emotionally attached to bringing this project to a fulfillment. Unfortunately, I think what's happened is that they've ignored or not paid close enough attention to their fiduciary responsibility to the town with this project. I mean, the question is, at what point in time does this become absolutely ridiculous cost? 3 years ago, I stood up at one of these meetings and said the $15 or $16 million was ridiculous. There's going to be much more than that, 18 to 20. The powers that be at the time told me I had no idea what I was talking about. They knew exactly what this project was going to cost. And they proved me wrong. 20 million was not right. It's 24 million, 50% increase in 3 years. And no guarantee that this is not going to continue to increase. And I mean, it's nice, it's a nice project, but it really is not worth it. We have an $80 million school project with a project down at the surf club that we're coming to. There's another 4% increase in the budget being requested this year. It's just not really something that I think we need to do at this point in time. One more thing.
Is there a question?
The Board of Finance voted 4-3 to pass this, and probably would have voted against it, except they felt that it should go to the town vote. They said, wrong time, wrong place, wrong project. It's not really something that we should be doing right now. And I don't know that in the 40 years I've lived here, if I had ever thought of leaving Madison because we didn't have a community center. We have a lot of resources, we spend a lot of money, this is a great town. This is just not something that we need right now.
Well, I think the point is that it should be the community's decision. And if the Board of Finance had not passed this, that takes the choice out of you about what goes on with this project. So I think all of us felt the important thing was, as I demonstrated up there, this has been a community-driven project from day one. It's not a Board of Selectmen project. We talk about emotion. I think we talk about emotion because this came from the town. So I think it's right for the town to decide. And we're trying to provide as much transparency and facts to the public to make a decision. When we talk about financial impact, let's go back to that slide. The bonding's staying the same. Any funding over that is going to have to be funded by outside sources, not town funds. You might think, well, the operating costs. I agree. The operating costs we presented that back in 2022 and the town felt comfortable with the operating estimates. We're showing the operating estimates now, updated numbers. So I just want to highlight that. And I think the most important thing is this is really your decision. So that's what we're trying to do. Let you make an educated and informed decision.
Hi, I'm Janet Nicolini. I just want to read something that was published in 2020. 2020. Key findings by the committee, which was the Academy Advisory Committee at the time. The Academy building is eminently feasible for conversion to a community center. The cost to Madison taxpayers for renovation of the building could be reduced by millions of dollars through tax credits and grants. The use of energy efficient and green energy systems will greatly reduce the operation and maintenance costs of the building. Program revenues could potentially pay for the staffing, operation, and maintenance cost of the building. If enough profits were generated from program revenues, they could potentially be applied to pay down the capital expense of the building, i.e. bond costs. Now, this is what was sold to the public. This is what the public thought they were voting for when they passed the referendum. So the public had a pie in the sky view of what they would be paying for here, and that a lot of it would be reduced by grants. So I know grants were never a definite, but the way it was presented was that they were really, really likely to be coming through and reducing the
Well,
cost.
I think the grants are always a part of these projects.
Right,
And we
right.
always try to get that, but I can tell you right now, no one ever said, we're gonna get $7.6 million. And at the time, we thought that was half of the cost of the project.
Regardless.
I mean, I understand your point. So, you have
Yeah,
a
so the
question?
point was we had the school at the time and we
Right.
had this at the
But
time.
do you have a question?
So, yeah.
Let her finish.
Well, that's my
No,
question.
no,
What's the
what I'm
question?
trying to say is you all are presenting the yes part of this, the rosy picture. You're not being neutral here.
That's right.
So what I'm doing is trying to present the other side, so all the people here could hear both sides.
Okay, I
You
understand
want
that.
the
This is
public
not
to,
a-
you want
this
the
is
public
not
to
a debating
decide,
project,
but
it's
you're
an
only
information
presenting
session.
one side for the public to
It's an
decide, which
information
is not
session presented by
fair.
the
You
town.
as selectmen should be neutral.
So,
That's right. And she's not.
so, go.
Yeah, hi. I was on the Academy Committee.
What's your name?
And my name's Lisa Nee, and I live in Madison, and I raised 3 children here. When we did the survey, and we got 2,000 responses, it's because we went out into the community. We were at the turkey trot, we were at the preschools, we were at the senior centers, we were at the parade, we were at the holiday shopping night. We were in the community, and when you say you get 2,000 responses, that is actually not representing how many people we touched. Because one person from the family answers that survey, but the reach was huge and the excitement was huge. And I, as a person who raised 3 children here, spent most of my time leaving Madison to take my kids somewhere for some kind of activity. And when I was there, I spent money. And I would drive by that town green and go, whoa, why is that empty? Why do we have people here? And by spending the money there, I was not spending it here in Madison. And the energy that, as we say, location, location, location. We may have things in different areas,
What's the
but
question?
hey, you know what? Nobody else asked a question. My question is, how can we keep the excitement of the feeling of Academy without Academy?
Lower taxes in town.
No, we're talking about youthful families who need a place to gather. Parents with strollers that have no place to
All
go.
right, I think that, I mean,
I have a question.
Excuse me.
I don't think we need to shout at each other.
yeah, I think that, look, there's a lot of strong feelings, we've all seen the strong feelings, okay? We all are on social media, we understand that people are very passionate about that, okay? I'm happy to answer questions. We are not all going to agree on this, but the point is that it's your decision at the ballot box. You can go out of this building, you can promote to all your family and friends, social media, flyers, letters to the editor, you know, you can all do that, because if you don't support the project, encourage people to vote no. But I just want to make sure that at least the facts that we're presenting is being accurately portrayed, that's all. So, go ahead.
I do have a question.
Okay, yes.
I'm Paul Sapig, I live on Neck Road. Assuming the referendum passes
Yeah.
and you get the 24 million, but I seem to go out for bidding until summer and maybe gets delayed. If it comes in at more than 24 million, then what happens? And can you scale back the scope of the project and will that imperil the grants you already have?
So fair question, and this was asked at the last session as well. There are some value engineering opportunities, right? But there's a certain point where we just can't proceed. And I don't think this board is going to support going out a third time. But we felt with the level of grants that we received, the town should have an opportunity to proceed with that. If the bids come back at 28 million, and let's face it, we all know there's risk. look what just was announced today at 4 o'clock, right? We have no idea what's gonna happen to costs, construction costs or anything else. All we can do is go out. We're not committed to anything until we go out to bid, which will cost a marginal amount of money, not really anything relative to what we've already spent today. And then we'll see where we are. And if the bids come back significantly higher than what we can kind of tweak the project for. Every project, you get a budget, and then you have to change things in the scope. We've done it in all our other projects. We modify it to fit the budget. This one was just so far outside of where we were that we couldn't do it. And so that's why we have to come back and ask voter approval. So yes, I mean, it is what it is. And you know, this is giving us a chance to go out to bid again and hope that we can pull it all together with the budget that we have, including the grant. So if you have, happy to answer another question.
So when he said, if it comes in very high, then you would cancel it. You said we can't do it, or?
Yeah,
Oh.
yeah, we basically can't. I mean, we're only getting authority to spend on the construction of the building $24 million. And we cannot bond for more than 15.9. So the only source, and it's written in the resolution, is donations or grants. So let me just go to people who haven't asked a question first, but please.
Thank you, Vic. I'm going to sit down. I just had surgery, so I hope you don't mind. Back in the 30s, 40s, 50s, and 60s, Andy Valambroso, First Pond Road, the public really didn't know what the effects of asbestos and lead did to the human body. Okay? Some of the seniors are emotionally involved because their children went there or they went there. If they knew in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that that type of toxins kills you, and I've lost a lot of good friends. One was the chief of police in North Haven from asbestosis. Why are you leaving all the lead and asbestos in that building? You're talking about future generations. If you ever have to do any remodeling in that building, then you're reopening all the encapsulated lead and asbestos in that building for all the little children to inhale over time. It's ridiculous. I can't believe that you're even going forward with this.
So, first of all, we're going to do everything that we're required to do for the health and safety of the community. And so, I'm not the person to have a debate about what the appropriate remediation is.
I'm asking a question.
Yeah.
Bill Valentine mentioned a little while ago, I think he's a really nice man, that this is all these specs, but the extra spending the $24 million now, that's going back to the specs of the 2022 referendum. It is not. It is an untruth because you're leaving all the asbestos in the building. What was sold to the public back in 2022, that we were going to get a clean building. You have taken that off the chart and you've doubled the price of the project.
So I don't know if I can factually rebut that. I'm going to defer. We will take that as a question online and we will post an answer to that. Because I think you're getting into very specifics about what had been provided when, and I don't know the specifics of that. So.
But you guys fired Colliers, or you mutually decided to separate ways, the project manager?
We made a decision. Last year we hired, well, in 2024, we have a permanent construction manager on staff now.
Okay.
And we felt that,
What's his name, Ben?
yes, Ben.
Ben at a Board of Selectmen meeting said that, to the board, and you were there, that proceeding with this project and leaving the lead and asbestos and the rest of the toxins in the building is not advisable, because you're opening up a can of worms and it can escalate the price through the roof. I estimated a year and a half ago, this is a $30 million project and more.
So,
So you're not taking Ben's advice?
no, that is not the case. I will say that he is now much more involved in the project, and I'm not going to speak for him, but I don't think this is appropriate to get into a back and forth on the specific issue. So I think we will address it, but I'm not going to answer your question tonight because you're getting into specifics of the project. And the town is, we're going to follow all the health and safety guidelines and requirements for this building and how it's being used. We've done that with every town building. We have a lot of old buildings in town. We follow the code, we do what we need to do, and this is gonna be, we're gonna follow all the health and safety requirements for the building. So that's my answer for tonight, and if you wanna get into specifics, email the Ask Academy specific questions, and we'll get details about what's in the actual design of the project right now. Any other questions? Yep.
Dana Schmaltz, Jonathan's Landing. A question and a comment. First of all, has any thought been considered about the upcoming surf club renovations and or a new building? And if not, perhaps maybe that needs to be started now so we can avoid something like this in the future. You know, that's another big nut that's coming down the pike. And my comment is the renderings of the building, just my opinion, don't fit in with the town of Madison. That looks like a college campus building.
That's right.
Yeah.
That does not look like something that belongs in Madison. You can smile, you know, it doesn't belong there.
I mean, look, people are gonna have different opinions on this, believe me. I've been doing this job long enough, and some people think something's beautiful, and another person will think it's heinous. So there was a design that went through, it's through public meetings. But I will ask you a question about the surf club. The Beach and Rec Commission has issued an RFP for a master planning process for this entire surf club facility. And so we'll be going out and getting a whole plan developed for that. There'll be a lot of public input and engagement on the future of the surf club and what investment needs or wants to be made into that building as well as the entire facility. So that process has started. It'll take some time. And we'll have some big decisions as a town to make on that going forward. So,
20 years like
so,
you piecemeal it like
any other questions?
Dawn Torres, I've been here for about four decades. So quick question, right now the Madison Youth and Family Services has its own building, correct? Okay. A question I have is how much thought have they given to the fact that granted they do safe rides, they do peer advocates, and all those I would find very appropriate to be in a building like this, even though I don't think we should build this. But they also do a lot of counseling, a lot of youth counseling, and they do a lot of family counseling. This is going to be a space where you want kids to hang out, you want everybody from the community. How are adolescents especially going to feel going to their appointments in a public open space?
excellent.
So there's been a lot of conversation about that, and you know, the director has played a very involved role in the design of the space and working closely with the architect to ensure all that. There's been a lot of concern about privacy. It's not unusual to have though youth services and stuff like that in public buildings. I mean, that's kind of what communities do across the state. But knowing that their clinic and everything, the way that we've incorporated some of the design, that's certainly been part of the thinking in terms of the final design plan. So,
Separate access.
I'd like to
yeah.
go on record and say that I think it would be a very poor idea,
Yeah.
is to have adolescents accessing
Peggy.
Yeah.
Separate access.
Yeah, there is going to be separate access, but that gets into the design elements and stuff. So I don't know if you want to address.
I can comment if you really want.
Yeah, just real quick. We'll take a few more questions.
So I'm Scott Cochran, the Director of Youth and Family Services, and we put a lot of thought into the design of our clinical spaces, and that's part of why we've really advocated to be included in some kind of a project that changes our space. Right now, we have clinical spaces that we use in our current building at 10 School Street. We also have some clinical spaces that we use, office spaces in Memorial Town Hall. That's part of the challenge that we're trying to address. It's always a factor when we're talking to young people about coming in for counseling, because there is certainly a lot of stigma that's involved in that. That's always a part of the conversation we have with them and their parents. And we do a lot of our way to help kids feel safe to access the services that they need. In Academy, the area that we would use for our clinical services are on the lower level, and we've designed in controlled access into that area, and we would be just approaching the same kind of challenges in that setting as we would in our current one. And I'm happy if there's people who have questions about who we are and what we do and how we do it. Very open to talking to anybody who wants to learn more about what we do and why we do it. Please reach out to me here or email, come out to one of our board meetings. We'd be happy to talk more. And thanks.
So just to be clear, that you would have your very own entrance just
Yes, yeah, so the lower level will be primarily the clinical offices that we have. So we would have an area downstairs where we would have the ability to have some reception there if we needed that, as well as some clinical staff.
But you enter from the outside directly to your clinics.
Correct.
We would have, well, if it's up to me, we're gonna have options where people can come into the building either to go through the main area or to come through maybe a controlled access or door from the outside.
I also want to comment that right now, they are using Memorial Town Hall also to see patients. So there are other locations that are being used that aren't dedicated to youth and family services. So, is there any other questions? Yes, please.
Hi, Lynn Thomas from Devonshire Lane. Has anyone talked about what you're going to do with all the empty classrooms at Jeffrey School, or what the availability of rooms, since Polson's not a full building? We're talking about some of the reason for this building is this community center is we need more space. I personally don't think we need more space. I think between the senior center, the library, Jeffrey School, and extra rooms of Polson, that we have plenty of the library. We have plenty of space. So has anyone done any feasibility study about what's going to happen when the new elementary school opens? What about what's happened to all those rooms in Jeffrey School that will be empty? Have we talked about using those as space for some of these programs that are needed? That's one. And I think in an informational session, the presentation should be objective, pros and cons. I don't think it should be skewed, so it's all the pros and this is why it should happen. I think an informational session should be
So in terms of a year ago, the board appointed a facilities committee, and one of the charges is to review the buildings that were going to be all town facilities, and including the buildings that are going to be vacated by the school district. So actually last month, the committee has really been more in data gathering mode over the last year, and they gave a really interesting presentation that looked at to the Board of Selectmen, so you can see that online, that talked about, really they did an inventory of all the town land, which was kind of fascinating, I think, for all of us to know and to learn more about just vacant land that the town owned, and then also the existing buildings, how many are vacant. So there's some good information in that report. The next step is they're going to be digging down a little bit deeper. They've also done a cost analysis, what it costs to maintain those buildings. So there's a lot of information. The next step in the process will be trying to figure out, it depends on what happens on May 6th, right? If May 6th fails, then we're going to be adding another vacant building back onto the discussion topics for the facilities committee. If it passes, then the community needs and uses for the building will be solved through Academy, and then they'll look at objectively at Jeffrey and Ryerson, and the intention is really Ryerson to be demolished. I think that was the plan all along with the school renewal plan, but they're going to be talking about what to do with those buildings. And I made a commitment that it's not going to be 20 years. So, when I came into office, Island Avenue was kind of in a quagmire. We had a renter, we didn't know what the future was. We put a committee together, we came up and did an RFP process, and then we let the voters of this town decide what to do with that building. And that was a pretty quick process. It took a year and a half. So I'm hoping that we can make some similar types of discussions. But I think one thing we've talked about is never having a master plan. We kind of address all these things in silos. We do one-offs, and that's what happened with Academy. Academy was kind of a one-off project that evolved eventually into the community center. And so we want to have kind of a long-term plan. So that committee ultimately is going to be developing a master plan for all the facilities in the town of Madison and coming up with some recommendations to look at it holistically. So if Academy moves forward, then we can step back. We've solved some of our space needs with some town departments, and we've solved some programming needs. So now we can look at what we have left and what the options are for those buildings. But there is a process moving forward and a plan in place. Yes, please. No, Mr. Mueller. We're just going to first questions first, since
Good evening,
there's a lot of people.
John Mueller, Kelsey Springs Drive.
Yeah.
As a current member of the Board of Finance, I suppose I could make a few comments, but I would prefer to restrict myself to the rules of engagement tonight and just ask a question. And my question is, I was unable to read your slide. Thank you for the presentation, by the way. I was unable to read your slide about the carrying costs, and I was wondering if you could give us at least an approximate number of what you expect the carrying costs to be for the facility.
About $400,000 a year. That's what was on the slide, and that included staffing costs and utilities and some operational costs.
Just as a follow-up, are you able to break that down into how many dollars per $100,000 assessment as we've done in previous?
No, but I guess you could basically take, I think we're generating around $1 million a year in interest on this project going forward, so, and that showed what, $25 per $100,000 assessment, so you could take a little less than half of that, another $10 or $12 maybe, and do that. But I also think that that would account for revenue that might offset some of that, you know, because there will be some revenue. So the net cost is what you have to really look at.
With your estimation of revenue, now I'm making a statement.
Yeah.
You're going to take approximately 30 to 33% off the cost of the carrying costs is what you're.
I was saying that I'm saying to equal, to cover, to have break even, you would need to have that building 30% utilization through the year, 30% utilization of rentable space for the year. So that's a break-even number. You can make a decision of whether or not you think that's feasible or not. And that's not including the beach and rec programming administrative fees and things like that that would be going through there.
If you tolerate me asking one more question, a few weeks ago you were on WTNH, it was a very nice interview about Madison and the status of the town. And you mentioned that the median price for a home in Madison is $700,000. That would mean it's assessed at $490,000 approximately. So looking at those numbers, we're basically talking, if you add the amount of debt service, according to the calculations that we have per 100,000 plus the carrying costs, we're roughly talking that prototypical homeowner of a medium priced house in Madison is going to spend 130 to 140 additional dollars per year. Does that
and
make
the
sense?
700 wasn't the median value, that was the sale price. So as we all know, what the assessor shows is not really always reflective of what the market value is of the property, but that was just the most recent median sale price. So I think the average is more close to 500 or 600,000.
But I want to make sure we're talking apples to apples. I corrected it to 700,000. I did a little research and found 660,000.
Yeah.
That's within limits. I think.
Oh, but the median assessed?
The median sale price.
Sale price. Right, but I'm saying, we're looking at this from the tax on your, what the assessor considers your market value, 70% of what the assessor considers your market value.
So that's where the 490,000 comes from. It's 70% of the 700,000.
Right, I understand that, but I'm just saying that I think that's a higher number than what the median, not assessment value, but market value of the appraisal. I think it's more like $500,000 is what, well.
Understood.
Why don't I just get those data, and I will post that online, because I think that way too. And,
thanks, I appreciate the clarification, that was very good, thank you.
Yeah, no, I understand that, but the 700 is, I think, a higher number than what the average appraised value, I guess is what they term it, the assessor uses, appraised value for the property. But yes, the math approach is correct. Yes?
Hi, Connor Foff, Kennedy Lane. To piggyback actually off the revenue that was brought up and then the feasibility study, have we looked at the utilization rate and the revenue brought in at the senior center, and if that's close to break even, because that I know has several rooms, or if neighboring towns get close to break even on operating costs from the revenue they bring in from their community centers? Because I think the 30% sounds low, but I do programming at neighboring community centers as well, and I don't know of any that are net operating neutral.
No, I think you're probably right. The senior center does not create a lot of revenue in terms of room usage, but the purpose of that building isn't to generate revenue. The purpose of this building is going to be much more programming focused. Beach and Rec does not run a lot of paid programming through the senior center, correct, Austin? So this is going to be more similar to really the surf club and how we run programming, because we're going to be bringing outside vendors in to run classes where we would get a 25% fee on top of that. So I just took a simple math saying, if I look at what just a basic fee would be, and looked across the rooms that we could rent out, we could get there with a 30% utilization rate. So that could be a mix of beach and rec programming, and it could be a mix of outside rentals. But yeah, no, I'm not, I think this building is just, it's gonna be different. There's not gonna be really a building like it in the state, in my view, of how it's gonna be used. Another, okay, yeah, well, let me go online before I go to second questions, okay? Because, are there any hands raised online? And then I think we'll give a few more minutes, but I want the online attendees to have an opportunity.
Yes, this is John Lambert. I've had the privilege of serving on both the advisory and the building committees. Through the advisory committee, I've been able to have firsthand feedback from residents and voters, over 2,000 of them, identifying their current needs and wants that are not being met. The survey was specifically targeted at things that are not being met by current services. And they were very enthusiastic about how they can be met with the new community center. Unfortunately, the building committee had to deal with the realities of cost escalation, and I just wanted to congratulate the Board of Selectmen on coming up with sufficient grants to be able to meet those original expectations without having to increase the out-of-pocket town obligations. So thank you for that.
Thank you. As a former member of both building committees, so.
Miranda Weaver.
Yep.
Say it's Mike Weaver.
Hello, it's Mike Weaver. I live on Island Avenue. I've been a resident of Madison for 30 plus years. And first I commend you for your presentation and your outlook at a use for the property. The fundamental question I have is more like, I don't see a justification for doing anything with that property. I don't see a need. Now, I can be convinced, and I think it would be good for you to convince me and other people who might put a no sign in their property. Why do we really need to do this? We have lots of space. We have lots of things going on in the town, and we have a senior center that I think is wonderful, but seems to be underutilized. What is the need for this project?
So I encourage you to read the presentation earlier on. It does highlight what the community thought the needs were for this. And in addition to that, the report I encourage you to look at that the advisory committee did laid out how the people want to use this building. So, you know, this is really a decision you as a voter have to make your own individual decisions. And I just want to remind people, this isn't just about, this is also a preservation argument and a repurposing argument of preserving something in our downtown. So it has been debated for 20 years. All I can do is present this, what the vision was when this was passed in 2022, and try to highlight all the great things it can do to our community. If you don't think then you have the opportunity to vote no, and that's the benefit of this going to referendum, is you have the opportunity to have your voice at the ballot box. But thank you. Any other online questions?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do. Okay, well, let me go ahead and then we'll go to the back.
The 24 million, if this gets passed, 24 million. The bids come in 25 million. Then what? It's done?
Well, I think
what's
if
the
you're within $1
percentage
million, there might be opportunities to, like I said, value engineer, picking different materials, not, having certain amenities in the building. But if you're, $5 million off, $10 million off, I mean, that's why we're here today. If it was $2 or $3 million, or if it was $1 million over back in December, we could have figured out a way to make it work. We're at a point, the only way we can make this work is if we use the grant funding to cover the cost, right?
So the 24 million is dropped in.
That's the number. So it is what it is, and we wanted people to have the option to approve this, because the funding is not coming from the town of Madison, it's coming from other sources. Okay.
Go or no go?
Art.
I'm Art Simons, I live at 65 Bartlett Drive, and I'm going to bring up a different argument than what we've heard. I have a lot of concerns about the cost of this project. Okay, I don't know who wouldn't. There's some good points that were brought up here. However, I'm going to vote for it in spite of those concerns, and who knows, it may end up being wrong. But my arguments for voting for it are my own and may not be shared by other people, in part because I went to this school. It means a lot to me. Sentimentally, I don't know how much sentiment is worth. And even more so than for me, my vote would be for the 90-year-old woman who calls me regularly, heartbroken because the only school she went to in Madison will end up being demolished if we don't do this. It's an important part of our history. I can't put a value on how much history is worth. I'm a retired history teacher, so I think it's worth a lot. So that would be my argument for how I'm going to vote. My main argument, and my second argument, is that Youth Services Department, of which I'm a member, Truth in Advertising, I'm a member of that board, and they need a more efficient, more professional facility. Does it necessarily have to be there? Maybe not. But, you know, people can argue about that. They do a lot of good work in this town, and they have professional employees, professional programs, and not a very professional facility.
Thank you, Art. I know I'm trying to keep this to
I know,
questions.
that was my
I know it's a
question.
statement, but thank you. I know there are other people who want to make statements, so. Yes.
Not from the outside.
Please.
The Jim Schmaltz, Jonathan's Landing. Couple of questions. So, can we get a report from the library on what their programming usage is? You know, percentage of time that rooms are used and the costs and income coming from them? Is that something we can post up?
So that's the library. It's separate. They have their own records. You can certainly request that from the library.
Okay. How about for Senior Center? Senior Center was originally designed as Senior Center, Community Center, so I think there's some things there. And then budget-wise, you know, like if we're gonna restore this building, you know, or remodel it and not restore it, if we're gonna save it for future generations, you really should be doing the full abatement on it.
That's right.
You know, like, even if you came back and said it's 28 million, this is what we need to do. Where I'm concerned is the project's always tried to fit a budget rather than create a budget for what the project needs to be. Right now, we're at 24 million for the simple fact that you can say we're not going over 15.9. When you do that, you're looking at this with a 3.6 million grant that can't be used for construction. You're over the money you have that you can spend in construction at this point in contingency.
Right.
So you've got to raise funds to get to zero. If you're, today, you know, the things that they're saying that people want were theater, they want music lessons, which you can get at the library, and a gym. We learned that the gym is small, it's for grade school children, not for adults. We learned that the theater isn't a functional theater. It occupies the same space as the small gym. We have a recital hall, and the other one won't have sound and light. That's another $1.2 million that's not in the budget, not funded, and not coming from town funds. So those aren't going to be functional spaces. If we get into the budget and we open up walls or anything, you know, every budget goes over. I haven't seen a project that it did. So looking at what your cuts are, it's, you know, you're going to cut, you know, the logo on the gym floor, you're going to change the walls, you're going to remove the stuff from the lounge, you know, the kiln, you know, like the things that are the community center are disappearing. You know, and you're gonna end up with empty rooms that you can't use town money for. What is your contingency plan, you know, to do that? Like the reports that you guys have, you know, where you were running through all the scenarios, you have like, we can save, you know, $100,000 by eliminating this. And it's all community center stuff, which I understand because the $4 million grant has to go for youth and family. So what's your plan if it goes over and you start to chip away at what the community center is?
So the plan is once we have construction bids, we can make those decisions. I mean, if we feel that we're not able to still deliver what the scope of the project is, we can't award the contracts. I mean, that's where we are now. That's why we're going out to the public. But this time, we're not gonna go out to the public to ask for more money. We picked $24 million. Just imagine if we said 28 million or 30 million. I mean, we figured we had bids that were roughly in line with the budget that we're set now. We built an extra contingency. We found areas that we think there's some potential savings in the project. And we want to go back out and hopefully make this work. The other option was the board's not going to pull the plug on this ourselves. This was a community project voted on by the public. So we have an opportunity now to go back out to bid, to evaluate where we are in the cost of the project using the grant money. And we will see where we land. So I can't guarantee, you can raise, there's a lot of, we could talk about what's gonna happen with tariffs, you know, how is this gonna, that could blow the whole thing out of the water when we go out to bid in June. I can't answer that question. All I can do is say, we wanna take another shot at it. I think the project deserves another shot, and that's why we're here today, to allow people to vote on this.
But am I wrong in saying that with the funding that you have today, you don't have the money to do the construction because...
Well, we feel we do. We've gone through the FF&E and the soft costs, and we've had conversations with the USDA. We've gone through the budget with Colliers, so we're comfortable moving forward the way we're moving forward. So that, and you disagree, and I get that. You've made that very clear.
So USDA will allow you to use it for construction?
No, USDA is going to allow us for soft costs, but look, this is a detailed conversation. I know you submitted a number of questions this afternoon.
Yep.
We will respond to those appropriately online, okay? And we'll post it so everybody can see the answers to that.
Can you
So I
bring it up
don't
in the
have any
public
specific,
session
I
also?
don't have any other specific answers for you right now, okay? So, Peter.
Hi, Beck. Just a clarification question, if you will. When I did buildings for Goodwin University or for Sacred Heart or for a number of different things in finance, I always had a 10% contingency factor in the construction budget. What do you guys have in this budget?
What's the contingency on it now?
8 million?
6.7.
And it's not on the whole budget?
Yeah.
It's only on the general contractor.
So I guess just the answer I'd like to know, because usually what we have is like, when we put 106,000 square feet up, we'd have a 10% buffer.
Well, and
with all the stuff we're
we've got
talking
6 or 7%, it sounds like.
Yeah, it might be
we
like, all right, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Keep in mind, though, this is based on actual market bids, so,
But we so.
yeah. So, any other first questions, and then I think we gotta wrap this up. It's 8:42, so, all right, we're good? All right, thank you for coming.